Religion has many victims, and these are the stories of how they survived. Welcome back to The Awakening, everyone. I'm your host, Heather,
And I'm your co-host, Tamara, aka Jezebel.
and we are so excited to be back with you again this week. We have a really incredible guest with us named Kyle. He is a deconstructed pastor that now talks about his experience and what it was like being part of the Christian faith. So we are so excited to have him here with us today. Welcome in, Kyle.
Welcome
Thank
in,
you.
Kyle.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you both for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
We are just thrilled to have you because I've known you for the longest time, it seems now, just because you were, again, one of the people that I originally connected with when I first got onto social media and started posting about deconstruction. And your content actually helped inspire me to get a little bit more
Wow.
bold and brave with my own content. And I'm
Awesome.
so grateful for the things that you put out there and the questions that you put out because they were questions that we were never allowed to ask when we were in
Right.
Right.
religious spaces, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
Right.
you challenge those ideas that make women small and,
Yeah.
prescribe these roles for people that we're supposed to just fall in line into. And
Yeah.
I am so grateful for that because people need to know that we are allowed to question these ideas.
That's
We
right.
are allowed to look at these things from a totally different perspective and
Mm-hmm.
entertain things that we were taught were dangerous.
hmm
Yes.
So,
Yes.
And for me, it is just refreshing, Heather as well, coming from the minister, her as a preacher's kid. I was raised with a minister's family. My brothers are married. So I know the interactions sometimes of
Mm-hmm.
everything that goes on with inside a church house, especially an apostolic Pentecostal faith and belief, being so high controlled and
Mm-hmm.
domineering over women, that when I see a preacher talking about things that register in it just with the core of me, it
Yeah.
just makes me know that my deconstruction is not for naught.
No.
yes, yes,
No. Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we always ask people when they come onto the show,
Mm-hmm.
where did you get started with the Christian faith? Were you raised in a
Mm.
Christian home? Tell us your
Before I
background.
before I answer that, let me give you both something that I want to share to you, to the
Okay.
both of you, about the both of you. I absolutely love to see women who deconstruct, because I know that from a pastor perspective, and that's growing up in church, women dominate the church scene.
Yes.
And,
Mhm.
and in no way, shape, or form do I believe that happens because women are weaker or less intelligent or anything like that at all. I don't know the dynamic, but maybe, well, I don't know the dynamic, so I'm not going to try to guess why, but I do know that women dominate the church scene. So when I see women taking back their autonomy, taking back their authority, taking back their power, taking back their self. I I can't tell you how amazing that is to me. That is just so amazing. And I'm going to give you both kudos and tell you how proud I am as a human being, how proud I am of you that you both have done that and are doing that. And not only are you doing it, but you're encouraging other people and women to do it too. Because every time a woman sees you two, they have to be thinking there's hope for me. I can get out of this
Yes.
too. I can be free. I can be,
That's so beautiful.
myself. And so thank you both for that. For what you're doing. I really, really admire you both for that more than you can ever imagine.
Now, Kyle,
That
you're not
means
supposed to be getting
so
us all
much.
teary-eyed on this show.
Right. Right. And I have to tell you, Kyle, Heather and I do a thing now when we go live. Heather, we have to do this for everybody. We'll our guest will ask us to talk in our fundy voices.
Yes, because
Oh,
when we were part of the church, we had our
Church, we
perfect fundy voices that we would
voices.
use to interact with everybody that was part of it.
And especially the men, when they would
yeah.
walk into the room, we would say, "Hi, Brother Kyle. Thank you
Yes,
for coming today. God bless you. God's
Hmm.
good all the time, and all the
all the
time,
time. God
God
is
is
good.
good." But
Yeah.
we instantly change our voices. We're
Hmm.
and if we're laughing, if you walk into a room with
Yes,
all women and we're all from, let's say, my apostolic Christian church that I grew up in, right? We could all be laughing and talking and doing whatever. That pastor walks into that room and there is no more cackling.
yes,
That's
it's
right.
There is
immediate
no more
silence.
giggling.
Hmm.
We immediately do silence. And do you know what else I learned last week? Is that we, as fundamentalist women, were taught
Not to talk with our
not to
hands.
talk with our hands and bring them
Wow.
into our laps because
Oh,
we become a distraction when we are testifying or singing or talking to
wow.
a man, that it's better for you to bring your hands together and be able to talk to them
Because
Wow.
it
without your
draws too
hands
much attention
moving.
to your body to talk with your hands.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't
Yes.
know that.
It's
Wow.
wild.
Yes. So you'll see
Wow.
a lot of us women that have deconstructed. And I've always apologized because my parents were deaf interpreters. So I'm like, oh, I just talk with my hands because I do.
Hmm.
And then when I read that, it
Yeah.
brought back a core memory of my grandmother, my mother, the women in the church saying, put your hands together and put them in your
Yeah.
lap like a lady.
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
You're a little lady, put your hands in your lap. And I did
Wow.
not know then that they were controlling
Yeah.
by the time I was one.
Yeah.
Pull your
Hmm.
dress down, cover
Yeah.
your knees, put your hands in your lap. That's how ladies sit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that those were indoctrinated thought processes
Hmm.
for, and grooming me to make sure that my
Yes.
voice, who I am, what I say, and what I do
Yeah.
stay small,
And a
meek,
lot of
and
people don't
humble.
realize that that's what a lot of the Christian spirit is. It's
Yeah.
grooming.
Yes.
It is grooming
Yes.
in various
Yes.
different forms.
Hmm.
You're groomed to be afraid all the time, right?
Yes.
And that fear
Yes.
is what keeps you in the box. It keeps you from
Yes.
exploring other ideas or, challenging
Hmm.
anything. And that fear
Hmm.
keeps you so small. It keeps you
Hmm.
Yes.
so afraid, so cowardly. I don't know a Christian that fears God that is not a coward. Like that
Yeah.
goes hand in hand. If you fear
Hmm.
God, you are a coward,
Yeah.
period.
Yes.
Because
And
Yeah.
if
you don't
you
even have the strength to stand on your own, right?
Hmm.
And it's crazy to me.
Yeah.
And if you are, um, there is a hierarchy inside inside churches that
Yeah,
I
for
have
sure.
Yes.
studied.
For
So
sure.
if you are Heather and you are a PK, you're not going to marry a sinner who just walked off the street
No,
No,
marrying him
absolutely
in
no,
not.
6 months.
Absolutely
absolutely
not.
not.
If
No.
Absolutely
you
not.
if you are a if you are one of the pillar churches in in the
Hmm.
church, if you're one of the
Hmm.
pillar families in the
Hmm.
church,
Hmm.
you have the opportunity of marrying a minister
Hmm.
Yes.
because women are taught they must always marry up. They
Hmm.
Yes.
cannot marry down, but that also goes for the men of our churches. So
Yeah.
there was a way that we were connected, even in
Yep.
dating and in marriage, that if
Hmm.
people came off the streets, the pillar families were not going to entertain that
Yep.
for their daughters.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let me share with you how true that is and how true that was for me. At 16, and I know the question was, how did this whole Christian thing start for me? Well, my mom, she found Jesus at I was 4 or 5, and by essence, I found Jesus at 4 or 5,
Yeah.
and she became a raging fanatic. I didn't know that time, but she became a raging fanatic, and one of the things, and I love my mom, and we're very close still, thankfully. And I had a little moment where once I deconstructed, I was very angry at what happened to my life, the life I lost because of it.
Yeah.
But you know, she and I told her recently we were out to breakfast. Said, "Mom, I love you, and I'm not trying to judge you, but you you enforce your passion for your beliefs on us. You didn't give us a chance to discover or decide whether or not we wanted it as well. You forced it on us so intently. And I was the oldest, and I was always trying to help my mother because we grew up kind of impoverished and really hard times. So I was trying to be the savior and the man of the house, even though this man was there. He was really not there in that sense, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to help my mother. So but part of that helping my mother, I was looking for her approval, her acceptance. So I really
Hmm.
gravitated to it kind of unwillingly because there was some, psychological internal things that I was going through as well, looking for acceptance and approval. And, my mother would, the only thing my mother ever got excited about was God things and church things. So
Yes.
Yes.
when you're around this environment and you're seeing her excitement over this, you're not seeing her excitement over your grades or if you want to do
Yes.
sports or because
Oh
you're
my
working, and
goodness.
you're not
Yes.
seeing that same level of
Mm-mm.
excitement. But over here it's like, oh, praise God, and oh, I'm so proud of you. So
Yes.
a kid obviously will gravitate towards where you're getting the
Mhm.
acceptance the most.
Yes.
So that's kind of how I grew up in that whole thing. But at 16, I was in church one day, and this, would-be prophet comes up, and he's a guest speaker. He calls me up and he says a whole bunch of stuff. And one of the things he said was, God has prepared a wife for you. And I'll never forget these words. God has prepared a wife for you. And God said, don't go looking on your own, because the enemy will try to deceive you. And he said a bunch of other things, only a couple other things I remember, but that stuck out and it traumatized me. And I remember I was very angry with that, because I was saying, why can't I make my own choice? Because I was also programmed to believe that you marry who God tells you to marry.
Yeah.
Attraction doesn't matter.
Mhm.
What you want doesn't matter. If God said this is it, that's who you marry. I had
Yes.
heard
Right.
stories of that growing
Yeah.
up in church and
We
seeing
were
people say,
Yep. We were told, the story of Hosea, right? Going out there
mm-hmm,
and marrying a prostitute. And if
yeah,
God tells you to marry a whore, you're out to
yeah,
go marry a whore, right? Like
yeah,
that was how we were raised. Like you do
yeah.
whatever God tells you to do. If God tells you to
Mm-hmm.
kill your own child, you pick up a knife and you take them up on a
You do
mountain
it.
and do it, right?
You don't ask
And
questions.
if and
Yes.
if I can interject,
Sure.
we we were told that we had to marry within the church. We were not allowed to marry outside the church.
Wow.
We weren't picked our husbands, but we were granted God's will over our husbands.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
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 So if
Did
it was if we were unequally yoked, if I was at this and he was just here,
Yeah.
it was not God's
it
will.
was not God's will.
Yeah.
No
Yep.
Yeah.
matter how we felt about him.
Mm-hmm.
If
Yeah.
he was here and I was here as a pillar's wife, as a family a pillar in the church, he
Mm-hmm.
could bring me up.
Yeah.
But he would not drop down to here because you were sinful. You usually weren't a virgin. You weren't pure. You
Oh,
Oh
had too
boy.
many
wow.
ideologies. There's no
Yeah.
way that a pastor can marry a woman who has already been exposed to this world.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then they
Yeah.
would be
Wow.
unequally yoked. So go
Mm-hmm.
ahead. I'm sorry. But yeah.
No problem. And so it really messed me up for a lot of years. And the rest of the true story, which is actually pretty sad as far as love and relationships in my life were concerned, there were two people who were outside the church that I fell deeply in love with. And I never brought them around. I was afraid to bring them around. I was afraid to introduce them. Because my mother one day told me she had a dream of a woman with long black hair, and she was the Jezebel. She was the Jezebel, and I had to beware of the woman with the long black hair. And
Yeah.
the first one was a woman with long black hair. So I meet her. I'm starting to like her. I'm starting to fall in love. I don't introduce her to the family. I kind of keep her on the backside. And I was in this constant tug of war of, God, did you send this person or did the devil send this person? And it really
Oh,
fucked me up for a
wow.
long time. And, I had no trust over the matter of my own love life.
Oh, yeah.
And so ultimately, the two that I loved the most and would have been great women, great wives were outside of the church. And the ones that I did choose, and I never got married, but I was engaged a couple times. The ones that I did choose were in the church,
And they
and
were
I didn't
worse.
love them. I didn't
Yes,
love
they
them.
were worse.
I didn't love them.
Yes. And that's that programming of we're not allowed to
Exactly.
be unequally yoked. So
Yeah.
how could I
Exactly.
marry somebody that's not of this faith? How could I
Exactly.
deeply love somebody that's not of this faith? Like this is cursed from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and that messaging, that programming stays with you. You're constantly checking
Yep.
yourself, constantly
Mm-hmm.
second guessing yourself.
Yep.
And in every aspect of your life, it's not just dating. It's if I'm going to get a promotion, is this what
Is this
God
the will of
wants me
God's
to
will?
do? Yes. Because
Exactly.
Wait,
even if
wait.
you've done the work, you still got to make sure it's God's will for you to get promoted. Like, what
Yeah.
the
Dating. Who dated?
heck?
I've never been a girlfriend. I'm just now being comfortable with being a girlfriend because it was
Wow.
God's
So you
will
went straight
and you were
from
married
single to
Yeah.
married. Oh, wow.
Yes.
with
Yeah.
nobody
Well,
was
see,
allowed to
men
stay in a
had a lot more
relationship.
liberty with that. Men have
Yeah.
a lot more liberty with that in church.
Yes.
A man can get a woman pregnant, and only she's going to get drawn up in front of the church.
Oh, yeah.
You
My
know.
brother
Yes.
is the example of the baby mama, right? Okay. He's got multiple children with multiple different women. He's never been publicly shamed or ridiculed or
Yeah.
criticized for that. But you let a woman be in that role, and everybody's going to be calling her slurs, right? They're going to be
Mm-hmm.
calling her names. They're going to label her as something. And it's like, you know, And I don't view my brother any differently because he's got all these kids, right? Like he
Hmm.
just
Right.
made choices in life that were different than what I made.
I
Like,
mean, truthfully, he was being biblical when you think about it.
yeah, I mean, he's taking
Truthfully,
care of all of his kids
Truthfully.
too,
he was
you
being
know?
biblical. He was following the biblical pattern of
Hmm.
Old Testament husbands and Old Testament men that had multiple women and
Yeah,
multiple children. He was
yeah.
Jacob. He was Isaac. You know,
Uh-huh.
he was the whole line there.
And I
So
remember telling a boy in school because we went to public schools, but all the youth group went to the same public schools. So there was no way to do anything because everybody saw everything and they would take you. But we
yeah.
went to an inner city school. We were a part of the busing and segregation programs back in the 80s or whatever, to
Hmm.
where they would take the bus from West Palm
Sure.
Beach and bus them out to the suburbs, and then they would take the suburb kids and bus them into the inner cities. So I was
Hmm.
always raised with and around outside of my church life in the Black community,
Hmm.
and there were a couple guys that really liked me, and I definitely got told on by people in the church, other girls, and was promptly told, "What business does light have with darkness?"
Yeah.
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 That
Yeah.
was what
Racism
they
in the
used.
yeah. Racism in the church is a whole nother beast.
Oh, it is.
It's
It
a
is.
whole
Kyle,
nother beast.
And the
Whole
I
nother
reality,
say
beast.
this. I can dance with you on Friday night. I
Hmm.
could sleep with you on Friday night. Not you. I apologize. I'm just using it as an
I
example.
understand. I
I
understand.
can go out and party and
Hmm.
get shit-faced drunk and fucked up.
Hmm.
Come Sunday morning, I may be still lying in that bed next to you, but I'm going to get up and go to the church on the other side of 8 Mile, and you're
Oh
going to
yeah.
get up and go to church in the inner city
Hmm.
of Detroit, and I'm not
Hmm.
going to be welcomed there. And when you come to my church house, you're going to be looked at as there. Well, I always say this since I left the church, that the most racist places in today's day and time
Oh yeah.
are all churches.
yes,
Hmm.
There are
yes,
churches
absolutely.
from the white
Absolutely.
community, and there are
Hmm.
churches from the Black community. We
Hmm.
Yes.
say things like, "Let's go visit our sister church on the other side of 8 Mile." That is so racist. I
Yeah.
left a church and walked up to the pastor and said, "When you tell me we have a sister church and we don't have a church that includes red, yellow, black, and white,
Hmm.
Yeah.
I will not be back."
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's wild because, a lot of us, like I was raised in a racist household and didn't even know I was raised racist, right? Like
Mm.
it wasn't
Mm.
until I
Yeah.
started listening to Black voices. I
Yeah.
started
Wow.
listening to people from marginalized communities. That was where I
Yep.
learned that that flag that my dad flew in his front yard beside the Christian flag and the American flag, that was definitely a hate symbol and had nothing to do with heritage. I'm
Right.
a
Yeah.
freaking Yankee, for God's sakes. Don't
Yeah.
tell me it's heritage because we were fighting on the wrong side of the battle in the first place. Like, what are you talking about, Dad? Like, you're psycho. But
Yeah.
that's my dad. Like, he will literally say, I'm not racist. We all have value. But then when people talk about racism, he will mock you. He'll ridicule you. He'll laugh at the things that the president posts and things like that.
Hmm.
And I'm like, Dad, you're very much a racist. Like,
Hmm.
you're
Yeah.
supporting, what ICE is doing and ripping families
Hmm.
apart and all this racism and oppression. And I'm like, I cannot understand how the very person that taught me to stand up for what I believe in and die fighting for what I believe in, die fighting for the least of these, is now the same person that's got weapons in their hand going after the least of these
Hmm.
instead.
Yeah. It's
It's just,
amazing how the programming really, really derails our humanity.
Hmm.
yes,
And we don't
yes,
know it, we don't see it
no,
when we're under that indoctrination and that programming. We think it's normal. I
yes,
was incredibly homophobic and didn't know it. I remember a little boy. I asked my mom one day, "Mom, what does abomination mean?"
yeah,
And she just said, the God hates it, something God hates. And I'm like, what is it? Then, she tried her best to describe it. I didn't know much about homosexuality, but as a young boy, I was like, well, if God hates it, I'm gonna hate it too.
yeah,
I was very, very hateful in my heart towards, the
Hmm.
thought of gay men, specifically gay men. And I remember like I was like 19. I remember the thought hit me. I was walking to the store and I was from I grew up in New Jersey, but I lived in Virginia for a little while, and then for a little small time we lived in Georgia. I was only for a couple of months, but it was very common for me to leave my house in New Jersey. There was you walk to the corner and there was a
Mhm.
corner store. So you're in the house walking barefoot. I would walk outside to the store barefoot. It was kind of a common thing at that time for
Hmm.
whatever strange reason. I wouldn't even think about doing that now, but I don't know. But anyway, so I'm walking barefoot and this guy pulls up in the car and goes, "You looking good out here with those bare feet." And I got so mad. I was, inside I was thinking, I will destroy you. I will beat your face into the ground. How dare you make this pass at me? And I remember this hatred, this anger, this rage. How dare you say something like that to me, kind of a thing. And so this had built up inside of me. Now, interesting story. I do home improvements. And one day I was at Home Depot and I saw this guy who looked like my neighbor that was farther down the block. I didn't know the neighbor, but I just would see him in passing sometimes. So I'm in Home Depot and I kind of glance and I go, I'm looking, I'm like, is that my neighbor? Because I knew he was in home improvements as well. Well, he made eye contact with me too. So I'm thinking that might be him because now he's looking to see if he knows me, like I'm looking to see if I know him. And then we don't say anything, and then we find each other in another aisle, and I'm like, I go up to him, I say, "Aren't you? I think you're my neighbor." He's like, "No, no, I don't think so." But come to find out he was a contractor. So we exchanged information because I said, "Listen, sometimes I work alone. He would like me too, and sometimes it's good to work with another contractor." And some reason we just exchange information. Well, he calls me 2 days later and says, "Hey, I'm having a housewarming party. I want to invite you." And then now my antennas are going up. My antennas are going up. I'm like, "Whoa, wait a minute here. Hold on now. No man calls another man to welcome to the house party like you know." So I didn't go to the house party. I was telling my friends, and they were laughing at me like, "Oh, he gay, he gay, he gay, ah, ha, ha, whatever,
Oh,
whatever." Well, I wasn't as homophobic in that point, but I was still homophobic. But anyway, so long story short, he called me again he said, "Hey, I got this job and I really need your help. We want to work together." And we started working together on these jobs. Now, I didn't know he was gay. I had a suspicion from that first moment, but I didn't know. He was Jewish and he was Christian. And I'm thinking that this is God giving me an opportunity to meet a Christian person because I can pick their brain and ask about Israel. He grew up in Israel and all those
Yeah.
things I was so interested in. And we became really, really great friends. We worked together on some projects. We became really good friends. But along the way, I started noticing those little things that said he might be gay.
Yeah.
And maybe after 2 years of building this wonderful friendship together, working together almost every day at some points, it registered that he was. And then I was in this dilemma. I said, what do I do? I love this guy. He's
Yeah.
one of my closest friends. What do I do now? And that was his name is Kobe, and I tell him all the time. I say, Kobe, you have no idea how you helped me break free because when I realized you were gay, the Kyle that I was to run, to
Yes.
yeah.
abandon you,
Yes.
to hey, get out of my life. I can't be nowhere associated
Yeah.
with you.
I can't be in a
But
relationship with you.
I had fallen in love with you as a person, one of my dearest
Yes.
friends, even to this day. And I was in that dilemma. I was like, I can't get rid of him. This is my dude. This is my guy.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And he kind of helped me there, not knowingly, but in that sense of the tug of war of the heart matter, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
like you're saying about your dad and other people in this arena, like I get confused because I was like, why is your heart not tugging at the human issue here?
Yes. Yes.
That's where I'm confused because
Yes.
in every moment where it was time for me to either be with my faith or with the human issue, I would side with the human issue every
Yes.
Same.
single time.
Same.
Every
Same.
So
time.
that's what confuses me about this.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and it's like people, we know that once you're in these religious systems, you get cut off from your empathy and your compassion and being able to see the humanity in other people. But again, it's really hard to understand how it is that the people that raised us to love people and believe that God loves everybody, there's not a soul on
Hmm.
earth that God doesn't love, are now the most hateful people towards all the people that they don't know how to love. And
Yeah.
that was the
But
same
were
thing
we?
for me because, like, I started meeting people that challenged my worldview because gay people was
Mm.
a big one because I was always told
Mhm.
that they were going to drag me to hell. But I'd
Yeah.
never been in community with a gay person until I started this job. And just like you, I worked with this woman and she was queer and she had always knew that she was queer and she had struggled with her identity and she had married a man. And I got to see this whole thing play out before my eyes, what it looks like when somebody is trying to honor God by dishonoring themselves over
Mm.
and
Mhm.
over and over again. And all
Mm.
that did was harm her over and over and over again. It harmed
Yeah.
her husband over and over and over again because
Hmm.
she was not able to admit to herself or to her family
Hmm.
or to anybody who
Right.
she really was. And she did not get free until she was finally able to be honest about all of that. Not only
Yeah.
was she able to get free, her husband was able to get free too. He was able to
Yeah.
go out there and find a partner or a new wife
Hmm.
that really loves him and shows up for him and can be all the things for him that you would want a partner to be. But, his
Hmm.
wife that he had would have never been those things for him because she is a
Right.
lesbian,
Yeah.
trying to fulfill this role that the church had prescribed for her. But that's the
And I,
problem. These prescriptions don't work for everybody. The same
No.
right.
medication doesn't work for every single human being because
No.
we're not the
Exactly.
same.
And this is what I've learned too, is that I always thought that I was taught God's love.
Right.
And
Yes.
I was. I was taught God's love. I was
Yes.
taught to hate. I was
Yeah.
taught to
Hmm.
destroy. I was
Yeah.
taught
Yes.
to bring
Yeah.
down. I was
Hmm.
taught to not build up. I was
Hmm.
taught to make sure I made fun of. Was taught
Hmm.
Yes.
to kick the table over if I didn't like what was going on. I was taught that God was a God that decided to do justice and that
Yeah.
God was a God of
Yes.
law and rule
Hmm.
and order.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
was taught exactly how I was supposed to be
Yeah.
taught about
That's right.
God's love. And I
Yep.
Yep.
say that about the reason why patriarchy remains
Hmm.
is because it works.
It
The
works.
Yes.
reason why I was taught God's love. Now, if you guys understand what I'm saying for
Yes.
anybody listening, I am talking about the God's love that I discovered once I started deconstructing. I
Yes.
was
Yes.
not allowed
Hmm.
to love anybody
Mm-mm.
outside my religion. I was
No.
not allowed to love anybody outside the apostolic Pentecostal faith
That's right.
if they didn't approve and line up with holiness, if they didn't
Hmm.
have their dresses 3 inches below their knees, if they didn't
Hmm.
have their hair pinned up on their head, if they didn't have the evidence of speaking in tongues with the
Hmm.
baptism in Jesus' name and have the evidence and the revelation that there is only the oneness of the Godhead,
Hmm.
Yep.
you were not allowed to love.
Yeah.
Nope.
They were to be out there until they were saved, and we
And
were
That's
not
right.
that's
to save
so
them.
much of what our Christian experience
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
very exclusive club where
Very,
we
very.
were mean
Hmm.
girls. We were all
Hmm.
mean girls who judged
So
everybody
fucking
I
mean.
was a mean,
harshly.
I was a
Yes,
mean, cold. Now,
same.
here's a dichotomy here. The heart of Kyle has always been kind. My
Yes.
Yes.
mother tells me, Kyle, you always had the kindest eyes. You've always been so kind. But the
Yes.
Kyle who was trying to please his God became a religious Pharisee zealot who
Yes.
looked down on people who, like you're
Yes.
saying, if
Yes.
listen, if you weren't with us, then you have
You're not
no
part of the club and we
you
have no
can't
business
even
No.
with you.
no
Yes.
no. I used to come
And you
outside my
know,
church.
and if you're backslidden,
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I used
yeah.
to
No.
look at people like, what's wrong with you? Like, why
Yeah.
won't you get bride? Why won't you get why? What's wrong with you? I didn't understand. Like, why?
We were taught to, if we ran into him in the mall, go to the other side of the mall.
Yeah.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Do
Like,
not have communion at all with a backslider.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
was
Because they'll
taught
drag you to hell.
God's
Like,
Hmm.
love.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, Kyle, you went
Yeah.
on to like become a preacher, right? How long
Yes.
did you preach for?
I was a pastor for almost 16 years, but my entire preaching journey started at 13, and by
Yeah.
21, I was ordained into ministry, and then at 26, I started pastoring.
Yeah.
Can I
So,
ask a question?
okay, go
It's
ahead.
a
Sure.
it's a little personal. I when I moved to Michigan, I've been very much a part of the Black community. And my grandbabies are biracial. I have a question. When I go
Sure.
into churches and the pastor has either been divorced or he's single,
Hmm.
all the godly older
Oh
women
yeah. Hmm.
protect him.
Oh yeah.
They don't
Church
let
mothers.
anyone, like if
Oh
I
yeah.
come in and I even the resemblance of a
Hmm.
Jezebel,
Yeah.
they
Hmm.
would never let me pass them to shake your
No,
hand
no,
and
no,
say
no,
hi.
no, no, no,
That
Oh,
is
no.
the
that's
truth,
wild.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's true. Yeah, it's
I
true.
saw it
It's
over and
true.
over. When I moved to Michigan, I became part of Word of Faith, and Bishop Butler was my minister.
Yeah, yeah,
My
yeah.
my
Keith
minister,
Butler. Yeah,
Keith Butler.
yeah,
I
yeah.
sat under him forever, and I
Yeah.
remember a couple years back, or no, many years back, he took a that say
Sabbatical. Yeah,
sabbatical
yeah,
for reasons, if you know, right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
But those mothers of the church,
Mhm.
protected that man and kept
Yeah.
him
Oh,
from any
absolutely.
extra evils.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I was
So,
saying, like,
were you lined up? Because I
I
wasn't sure
love,
if you were
yeah, I
married.
love this person who wasn't in the faith.
Yeah.
And I knew I could never bring her to church. I
Yeah.
knew it. I
Yeah.
knew I could never bring her to church. She was never going to be accepted. And again, acceptance was huge.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
when you break free, you're like, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a damn.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I don't,
Yes.
I
That's
could care less.
exactly.
Like,
Yes.
this
It
is my
doesn't
life.
matter.
I'm living it for me now. And this is what makes me happy. And I'm going to do me. And if you don't like it, go kick rocks. I really don't
Yes.
care. And that
Yes.
goes to from mom all the way down. I mean,
Hmm.
just like I love my mother, and one thing I had to learn the difference of is respect for her as a human being versus you still
Hmm.
having this influence over my decisions, you know.
Yes.
Hmm.
And once I realized that, listen, I don't care if you don't like what I'm doing, like.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I told her one time, I said, Mom, when you were making the decisions you made, the decisions that kept us in peril, the decisions to stay with this man that put us in danger all the time, the decisions you made to drag us to church, when you made these decisions, you were not going to take my advice. I could not come and talk to you and tell you how you shouldn't be doing this, and I'm not happy with what you're doing. You would have told me to shut up, mind my business, stay in the kid's place.
I,
So if you had that
Yes.
autonomy to make your own decisions, and I didn't have any influence over it, then I've got the same autonomy to make my decisions, and you've got no influence over it. I don't care how you feel about it. And
Yes.
so it's those kind of moments you reckon within yourself to realize
Mhm.
how much of this we had given away to other people into these systems that were
Yes.
never going to reciprocate it back to us in the same way. And
Mhm.
one of the things like I said, I mentioned earlier that I really love about what you both are doing is that you're giving women the courage to be free. And I hate
Yes.
misogyny. I hate patriarchy. I hate the role I played in misogyny and
Yes.
patriarchy. Even though I wasn't fanatical with it and I wasn't crazy with it, I knew certain things weren't right and I was very limited in the things I preached about. I didn't preach fear. I didn't preach control, even though it's still in there, but I didn't preach it as a driving force.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy about that, but I still regret the role I played because I still perpetuated it down the line. So
Mhm.
one of the reasons, and I do it more on Facebook than I do on TikTok, I really push the anti-misogynistic,
Yes.
anti-patriarchal,
Yes.
perspective because I want other men to say, hey, you know what, you're right. We shouldn't be acting this way. We shouldn't be doing this. Women are equal. There's no difference here at all. Let's all get this
Mhm.
thing together. I remember a few years ago, I saw a post, and this kind of what kickstarted for me. I saw someone who was making a video about women preachers, and I was like, and this is right along the time. I don't know if it's AT&T or it's really huge corporation. A woman had just been named the CEO of this huge corporation, right?
Mm.
And I remember like this, I saw this video and I also had got this news about this woman who had got promoted to this position. And I was like, I'm gonna do a video. And I was like, how insidiously stupid are we to believe that a woman can't preach, but women are leading corporations and leading countries and leading in all
Yes.
other fields, and we're going to sit here with our little
Yeah.
small minds and think that a woman can't preach. Let's get out of this archaic cavemen
Yes.
mentality and let's recognize women for who they are, the strength that they have, the power that they have, the intelligence they have, and things of this nature. So I'm going to continue to be that voice against it, and
Mhm.
I do believe whether it's racism or misogyny or whatever it is, I do believe that within our consciousness we were growing into a bigger part of it, and this bigger part of
Yes.
our consciousness is getting us to understand just how detrimental and dangerous these belief systems are. I believe, and at least within my hope of belief, that within the next few generations, we're already starting to see it, that more and more people will wake up and realize the idiocy, the idiocy of
Mhm.
God belief itself. You
Yes.
Mhm.
know, we're becoming a lot less dependent on the unknown God and becoming much more dependent on science and medicine and technology, the things
Yes.
we can touch, feel, understand, figure out, see, and all those kind of
Yes.
things. So
Have
I do
receipts and
see
proof?
receipts and
Yes.
proof. Absolutely. I do see we're on this trajectory and we're doing well. We've got a long way to go, but I'm confident
Yes.
that somewhere in our humanity, we're going to get there and we're going to be a hell
Yeah.
of a lot better as a group of people because of it.
Absolutely.
And
And,
Kyle, I want to say
go ahead.
this because I always say this too, is that patriarchy exists and continues
Hmm.
because of matriarchy. If
Yeah.
the
Yes.
women would
Hmm.
stand
Yes.
up and
Yes.
challenge the men of our community of
Hmm.
Christian faith out in the jobs, you are
Yes.
not just Christian
Yes.
in a patriarchal
Right.
society.
Right.
We are in a
Right.
patriarchal society. The
Exactly.
more women that stop promoting men
Hmm.
who do these kind of
Yes.
things,
Yes.
the more woke we'll become as a nation, and the
That's right.
more the women call men out for
Hmm.
those behaviors. And I'm not saying in a disrespectful way,
No.
but I'm
No,
No.
saying, excuse me, that is
Hmm.
not okay.
we're not
What
doing
you
that
Right.
anymore.
said is
Yeah.
not
Hmm.
right. You
Right.
can't say that. And when they know they no longer have my support, they know
Yes.
whoever I hang with, they know that they lost their support as well. And the
Th-
minute patriarchy is taken down, it will be done by the women.
I believe it.
Yes, because
Totally believe
women
it.
are the ones, and we say this all the time, they
Yes,
carry water for these systems. They keep
yes.
these
Hmm.
systems in
Yep.
motion because
I
they are the
totally agree.
ones who do all the work behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And I saw this
Absolutely.
quote the other day online, and it fits so perfectly with this conversation because it says, the greatest gaslighting in history may be convincing the source of life that she is second. See, women, once they
Mm,
realize how powerful they are,
yeah.
where their true place really is, that's
Hmm.
when this society will change. Because
Hmm.
matriarchy is so different than patriarchy. Patriarchy focuses on
Hmm.
propping up and elevating men,
Hmm.
matriarchy focuses on elevating everyone. Let's
Hmm.
Yes.
focus on nurturing
Hmm.
the children and
Yeah.
raising them up. And
Hmm.
that's a huge part of matriarchy is
Hmm.
loving the children and protecting them,
Hmm.
because if
Hmm.
we can't protect our children, we don't even have a
A
future.
future.
And when
Right.
we look
Exactly.
at patriarchy itself, it doesn't protect our children. It
No.
protects the people that's harming our children, you
It
Yeah.
know?
protects the men. And once
Yes.
men realize that they lose control, and I honestly believe that is why there's such an uprest
Hmm.
in our country today, is
Yes.
because women are saying no more.
No more.
Good.
We're
Good.
Now
tired of
for
being told we're
Good.
second because
now for
I
we are no
women
different than
listening,
you,
yeah.
right?
I,
Like,
right?
I heard a quote that said, all of the problems, all of the wars that's in the world can be traced back to old white men.
yes.
Yes.
Yes. It's men. It's not
And this
women that are out here doing all the violence. We're not committing all the
Right.
crimes. I'm not saying women don't commit crime, but
Right.
it is so disproportionate to the men that are
Mhm.
committing these crimes. And
You know,
then when we look at the color of the skin of the people that are
yeah.
committing the crimes, white men commit
White
over
men,
80% of crime in this country.
Yeah.
Over
over
Yeah.
80%.
40%,
And I
Yeah.
over
was
80,
raised to
40%,
believe
40
that
years old.
it was always a black person that was
Yeah.
going to come harm
Yeah.
me. Like
Yeah.
I was indoctrinated to believe that.
Yeah.
And I was never told to fear the white man. In
Yeah.
fact,
The
I was told
propaganda has
to
been,
blindly trust
yeah.
the white man, even though
Right.
every time I've ever been hurt in my life or
Hmm.
manipulated or traumatized in
Yeah.
some way, it came at the hands of a white man.
Yeah.
I've worked in public for years, and I'll tell you what, when I work at public, I have no problem when black people come into the store. It's always the
Hmm.
white ones that make me scared,
Hmm.
especially if they're wearing a cross around their neck, because I
Yeah.
know that that is the man I have to fear more than anybody from the BIPOC community or anything
Hmm.
like that, because
Hmm.
it would
Yeah.
make me feel uncomfortable. I can remember one night there was a young man that came in. It was wintertime, and he was wearing like a ski mask. It was
Hmm.
cold outside. And he would always walk across the street to come into the store. I was working a little vape store, and he came in there, and a white woman came in behind him, and she stayed, until he was done shopping and everything. And this young man had been in my store many times, really nice kid. And she was like, "Didn't you get really scared right there with him being in here with you with that thing on his face like that?" I
Oh,
was like, "Honestly, honey, I'm more terrified of you than I would ever be of that young man." And
yeah.
she was pissed. She
And
was
I
mad
say
at
that
me,
all the
but that's
time.
the truth. You're more dangerous than that young man to me. I do not
Yep.
fear people that have a little melanin in their skin because I know if my babies needed help, the person with color in their skin is going to be the person that's going to be the safest place for them to go to get that help.
Yeah.
Not only
You
that,
know?
I lived my whole life in West Palm Beach, Florida. I moved to Michigan and have lived the majority of my life in the suburbs and in Wayne County with Detroit. I go to Detroit and I can walk Woodward at 11
Yeah.
o'clock at night and never even blink my eyes. And know that when I make sure that everybody who's around me knows that I am there and I am an ally,
Yeah.
I have no fears. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
if I go to Royal Oak, if I go to
Yeah.
Troy, if I go to
Yeah.
Macomb County, you guarantee I'm not going to a bar and leaving that bar by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
But people
it's
are like, you
always
can't do that. That's
it's
Detroit. And
always
I'm like,
diversion,
yes, you
right?
can.
We're always
Yeah.
being diverted from the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Years and years and years ago, slightly after slavery, to keep black men in their place, the newspapers and the news outlets at that time would create false stories of white men
Yep.
raping and killing
Yeah.
white women, black men killing and raping white women, and they did this to keep that fear
Yeah.
alive,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
and
Rosewood
so.
in South Florida, Rosewood, Florida.
Mhm,
The last living person that was a part of Rosewood, this town in
mhm,
Rosewood, that
mhm.
was completely destroyed and
Yeah.
burnt to the ground
Mhm,
because a white woman lied on a
mhm,
man. There is
mhm.
still one person alive in West Palm Beach today to tell the story about what
Wow.
Yeah.
happened in that city. But you're
Yeah.
absolutely correct. They
Yeah.
made up the stories,
Yep.
they
Mhm,
perpetuated the stories.
Yes.
mhm.
And I can't think of his name, the little boy that was in Mississippi.
Emmett
Um,
Till.
Emmett
Yes,
Till.
and his mother
Yeah.
had the had the casket open.
Mhm.
Chicago is doing such a fantastic thing. They bought his childhood home, and it's a
Oh,
historical home, and they're
Oh,
opening it
good.
wow.
as a museum for everything that him and his family have gone through.
That's
And I
so
Good.
went
cool.
to it when I was in
Beautiful.
Chicago about a year ago, and I stood there just crying because I
Yeah.
know the
Beautiful.
story, but I
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
the true story today, Kyle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was given the white version story my whole
Yep.
life.
Oh, yeah.
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 And that's another thing that was so shocking for me was
Mhm.
actually reading, American history and learning
Mm.
what it is that your people went through, right?
Yeah.
Because I would have never known that my people ate your people. I would have
Yeah.
never known that your people were turned into shoes and handbags and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
sitting with just the weight of that. And
Mhm.
then knowing how my ancestors just acted like slavery was just no big deal.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That is
Yeah.
horrific in and
Yeah.
of itself,
Yeah.
There is
how
a
you were
book.
You
just
have to vilify a group of people, and that we see it happening now
yeah,
with the immigrants, the people they call immigrants.
yes,
I hate the word. I hate the
yes.
term.
I use
Yes.
migrants
But
all the time
yeah.
because I hate
So
that
yeah.
dehumanizing language.
Right. So if you dehumanize a group of people, when the
Yeah.
atrocities that the people in power want to commit against the people start happening, then we don't bat an eye.
No,
We
Hmm.
don't.
because it's
Oh, they're just
justifiable.
get those those
Yes.
migrants, those immigrants, those get on out of here. You deserve it. So
And that
we
is so much of what
mhm.
Christianity programs you to do is to
Yeah,
just dehumanize people, to strip
dehumanize.
them
Yeah,
of their
yeah.
humanity
So
because
the guy on
we're
the
not
street that you
taught.
mentioned,
Yeah.
the woman on the street that you mentioned, the people who are not like us that you mentioned, we
Yes.
dehumanize them. They weren't on our level.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
if we used to, true story, we had a storefront church at one point next to a liquor store. We used to come in there on Friday nights to the church and pray that God would shut down that store.
Oh my
We had
gosh.
no regard for his livelihood. We had no regard for how he was going to
Wow.
pay his bills. We had no regard for his
Yeah.
humanity, his right to make a money, his right to be in business. We had no regard for
Yeah.
that. The only thing we thought about is God shut down that liquor store
Yeah.
because we were offended that that store was there next
And
to
the
our church.
reality is if you would have opened yourself up more, it could have been an opportunity for you to witness to some of the
It could have,
people that
yeah,
were going into the
yeah,
liquor store,
Kyle,
yeah,
like
hmm
that.
Kyle,
hmm
you know certain things are legal now in Detroit, right? You can walk right
yeah, yeah,
out your
yeah,
house
yeah,
and
yeah,
down the street.
yeah.
I'll have to send you a picture. Every church is surrounded by
Are you serious?
dispensaries.
Oh my gosh, that is
And
Awesome,
awesome.
I
good,
just have to say this
good,
because they're the
good.
old churches, right?
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
they
Yeah.
have to open the windows during the summertime.
I love it. I love it.
And I remember the day I would be like, "Oh, that's awful. They can't like, start
Yeah.
a business right next to a church." And now I go by and I'm like, "Go
Yeah,
boys.
that's
Yeah,
Go,
I
right.
love
go,
it. Or if
go,
I'm driving down
go.
the road and I
Go."
see like an adult club or a nightclub across the street from a church, I'm rooting
I
for the
love it.
nightclub more than I'm rooting for
Exactly,
the
exactly.
church.
And it is the funniest thing
It
because they're
is.
like, we're the Christians are like, we are getting dispensary per square foot per square mile in Detroit more than we're having God. And I'm like,
Thank
yes.
you,
Yes, that's
Jesus,
right.
though. Maybe
That's
if some of them
right.
people were to smoke some of the Lord's lettuce, they would be nicer people. I'm just
Well,
saying.
they do
Yeah,
behind
they
the
do.
scene. You know they
They
Yes.
do.
do.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that was, this is such a good conversation because it's one thing that a lot of people don't talk about is how many people actually commit the sins that we were told not to commit that still show up at church on Sunday. Because I can
Yeah.
remember, a woman in the church that was straight on pill addict, right? She would be
Hmm.
popping pills all the time, but that was her medicine, so it was okay, right? We had the alcoholics that would show up at church and you could
Yeah.
literally smell it on their breath, but but they
Hmm.
weren't doing it in church, so it didn't matter. Like we could overlook everybody's sin that was within the building, that
Yeah.
was still putting money in that offering plate.
Oh yeah.
We didn't talk about none of their business. It was always the people to, well, I should say we didn't, but I was part of the prayer chain. So we did talk about everybody's business, but that's a
Yeah.
whole different conversation.
I have to tell you guys, if you were raised in an apostolic Pentecostal church, you were scared to death to sin. There was no
Yes.
way
You
you were
were.
going to
Yeah.
get up. You were. We didn't have. We had no one who drank in our churches. We had
Yeah.
no one who did schmugs or
Yeah.
TikTok. Had nobody who did things, but we had the atrocities of things that were
Yes.
done in secret.
Um,
Yeah.
But if you did
Yeah.
anything publicly, you
No.
knew you were going to be called in front
yeah.
of that auditorium, and the shame and the shunning that you were going to receive by that hellfire and brimstone
Yeah.
pastor. My pastor flipped the pulpit down the altar one day and rolled it all the way to the first pew because he was
Yeah.
so angry at one of the young boys in the church wearing something that was a little modern and stylish, right? And
Yeah.
you remember those things as a
Hmm.
Yeah.
kid, and when you
Yeah.
go to church and you see a minister starting to kind of like, get a little
Yeah.
excited, you're like, I need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. We were
No.
terrified of our
Yeah.
pastor.
We were.
Oh,
Terrified of our
Yes.
pastor.
Yeah.
Terrified. Growing up, this man who had the appearance of godliness and power and
Yep.
anointing and control. We were so terrified of him for
Yes.
so very. Everything he said went. Everything he
Yep.
said, no one questioned it.
Yeah.
And true story. And growing up in church and then having the I'm not going to call it the privilege, but having the opportunity, I guess, to be around pastors, you get to see and hear a lot of stuff that's going on behind the
Yes.
scenes. And I can tell you this overwhelmingly: most pastors don't believe the stuff they preach.
No, they
Most
don't.
pastors' lives are full of what is called sin and
Yes.
debauchery, and that's just a fact. I
Yes.
of all of the pastors I knew and know still, which is a lot of pastors, there's a smaller percentage of them who stayed faithful to their wife than there is versus the ones that didn't. And the
Yes.
percentage is very small.
Yes.
And, that's a whole nother topic, a whole nother, show one day about the sexual abuse that's happening in church, the tragedy that goes on with that whole thing. And how it happens. I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. I was never married. I was always single. And so, I even couldn't maintain a level of decency because I had all of this attention coming my way. And so the only saving grace I thought I had was, well, I'm not married, so I'm not cheating on anyone, like these
Yeah.
other pastors were. But the level of um I was pretty bad. I was
Yeah.
pretty bad.
but the mothers of the church protected those secrets and they
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
they
protected
they
Absolutely.
they
everything.
they protected the secrets, and especially because we were in a
They
smaller
knew.
church. We were
Yeah.
Yeah, we were in a smaller church, and I tried my best to keep everything as private. Like I said, I kept people on the outside,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but there were a couple people in my church that they were adults and things of that nature, but still they had they would show me interest, and eventually I
Yeah.
would cave into the interest, and they became one of the ones. And
Yeah.
obviously I'm not proud about that now as a human being and as a man. I was never really proud of it, and it was never a conquest for me. That was more of an internal thing of looking for
Yes.
acceptance and love and trying to be fill the void that I had from the unhealed trauma as a kid. When I went through my process of inner healing, I realized what that was, why that
Yeah.
was there, because it was anti Kyle, the person, but it
Yes.
was something else bigger that was driving that. What I thought
Mm-hmm.
was fulfilling that deeper sense, and another thing too, it really goes to how incredibly inept this whole God thing is. Because I'm
Yes.
in church, I'm praying, I'm fasting, I'm speaking in tongues, I'm doing all of the stuff with full heart commitment, full blown commitment. I would beg and pray and beg and pray and cry, God, take away this fornication, take away this sexual drive, take it away, God. And I would
Yes.
be on my altar, crying before God, pleading before God, begging God. And not one time did this God ever show up and say, okay. And I remember thinking about it, and this is what I tell people sometimes when I do some videos of trying to say the aha moments of, you know, people think, because Christianity teaches us we're going to stand before God and give an account. We're going to stand
Yeah.
before God and give an account. And I said, okay, fine. But what is this God going to do when it's playing back to life and it's seeing me down there 1, 2, 10, 50, 100, 200 times, begging it to take
Yes.
away the desire?
Yeah.
Shouldn't I now shine the light back on God? Okay, what do you got to say about that?
Yeah.
You see it. We were looking at it. You saw
Yeah.
me. You saw my heart. You saw my sincerity. You
Yep.
saw my tears. You saw it all. And you did nothing. And you
Did
expect me to be
nothing.
punished because you didn't help me. And they told me that you were the strength
Absolutely.
and you were the source and you were the one that was going to help me if I humble myself before you. And you
Yes.
didn't do it. So F you, your judgment and everything. I'm going to judge you.
Yes, and that's exactly what it is, because for so long we were told that that was our own failure, that we
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
didn't have enough faith, we weren't close enough to the
exactly.
Lord, we didn't spend enough time in the Word, blah 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 blah
Hmm.
blah. But it
You
was
Right.
just
were
the
a
fact that we were
Jezebel.
praying these prayers to a
Yeah.
fucking deadbeat dad that was an absent father, right?
Bingo.
And he never showed up in the first place. And when I look back at all the times where I thought God had showed up, that was just freaking me. It was me
Exactly. You did
showing
a
up
video
for
about that. I
myself.
remember you did a video
Yes.
about that.
And
Yeah.
it's so irritating because it's like all
Yeah.
this time I outsourced my power, but at the same time, I was the one
You were the
controlling
one.
everything. I was
Yeah.
choosing where to go, what to do, what to
That's
say. And it's
right.
like, oh my gosh, you're so stupid. Like, I look back on that and it's like, how could you have been so stupid? And the
But there's
debauchery really that goes on behind the scenes, you are not kidding about that.
No.
Because
No.
I remember when my nephew was in college at Morningstar University in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that is Rick Joyner's, thing that he started.
Mm,
But he's big
yeah.
into the prophetic and all that. But they
Yeah.
would have these big collectives where, like people from Bethel would come in, all the major
Hmm.
pastors, right? It's a mega church. So they have all the mega church people come. And my nephew told me they always had a secret bar set up for all the pastors behind the scenes. Like the
Hmm.
young guys, they were forced to sign NDAs, first of all.
Hmm.
So they can't talk about what happened. But my nephew told me. So I didn't sign it. Anyways, but they would set out like Rick Joyner's favorite cigars with his cigar cutter and his
Hmm.
bourbon that he liked and his whiskey. And like they
Yeah.
knew exactly what alcohol he liked, where to go buy it, yada, yada, yada. And it
Some
was
knew
each
which women
pastor was
they
different.
liked.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
We would,
exactly. And they would
there's
have
some
all these
would, yeah.
things back there for them
Yeah.
ready to go, But
Yeah.
this is the stuff that people behind the scenes are out there in the audience. They're being told all that stuff is sinful.
Yeah.
They are not
Zachary,
allowed to engage in that behavior, right?
there
And
was
the
a mega
hypocrisy of it
pastor.
all is just
Yeah.
wow. Mega church culture is so hypocritical.
Oh
Every
my
bit of it,
God.
top
So
down. Like,
dangerous, toxic,
yes.
dangerous. Oh, just horrible, horrible, horrible.
So we always ask people, Kyle, before
Hmm.
we're getting ready to wind down in the show here,
Yes.
if you were talking to somebody who is just starting their deconstruction
Oh,
journey,
yeah. Love the
everything's
question.
imploded, they don't know what to
Yeah.
do, they're freaking out because we all know that that is like having the entire rug ripped out from underneath you. What would you say to them today?
Simply trust yourself. You're here because you're listening. You're finally starting to listen to the deep voice inside of you that this isn't right. And it's going to be scary. It's going to be tough, but continue to trust yourself. I remember when I made the decision in 2009 that I'm going to start trusting what I feel inside, not what I knew up here, but
Yes.
what I
Yeah.
was hearing inside. Every time I did that, it led me to another level of peace. And it went from
Yes.
peace to peace to peace to peace to peace. So just trust yourself.
Yes.
Just follow your heart and your instincts.
Yes. And trusting yourself is so hard. And I think that's such an important thing to remind people because it's one of the things that we were first cut off from. We
That's
were
right.
told that trusting ourselves was
Right.
dangerous, that
Yeah.
leaning into our
Proverbs 3
intuition or our
5 was my
feelings
favorite.
or
Yeah.
and the
Trust in the
reality
Lord with all
is
your heart. Yeah.
yes, is
That was
when
my
you kill
favorite.
that self-trust, you kill your curiosity, you
I have
kill
a
your
question.
ability to grow. Go
Hmm.
ahead, T.
Yeah.
I have a question. So when I left, right, I moved to Michigan, and at the time I thought I was just deconstructing from the occult that I was raised in.
Hmm.
Um, and then I came up here and went to a MAGA church.
Hmm.
That was an altogether different experience, right?
Of course.
But I found myself always like justifying because I was deconstructing a cult. And then
Right.
the more I sat into church spaces, I
Hmm.
realized that it wasn't okay. And
Right.
then one day when I like looked at the Bible and read a scripture, I'm like, that that's a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Bible became very easy for me to say, not true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. Me
Yeah.
too.
Songs became very easy for me to say,
Yep.
not
Yep.
true.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But do you know what I still struggle with when I get up in the morning? Is whether I put a dress on or a pair of pants, whether I cut my
Wow.
hair or put my hair in a ponytail just to fit.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the
It's very
indoctrination
deep.
that
It's very
Yes.
deep.
and
Very
you
deep.
don't know that it's there until
Hmm.
you're sitting there one day. And I'm
Yeah.
like, damn, I'm like, I have been like out of the church for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
And people look
Yeah.
at me and they're like, ah, There is a reason why I
Hmm.
maintain the name Jezebel. It's because
Yeah.
I cannot separate myself
Yes.
in my brain, not in my
Yes.
outside, in the thoughts in my brain from the
Hmm.
indoctrination that I got
Yeah.
from being raised
Yep.
in it
But
and
it's
born into
because
it.
it's woven into who you
It's
are.
Yeah.
deep.
So,
It's
yes.
so
And
deep.
when you
It's
think
so
of how,
deep.
fabric
Do
is
you,
made and
yeah, do
everything,
you
Hmm.
well,
find
yeah, it's
no,
part
I
of who
was,
you are.
Yeah.
yeah, Kyle, do you find that as
Yeah.
well as being a pastor that sometimes you'll
Yeah.
be sitting there and all of a sudden you'll be like, judge not, lest you be judged?
Yeah.
Like I
Yes.
quote scriptures all
Yeah.
the time.
Right now, I'm
I stop.
I would like to clearly say I'm past it all right now.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
But I do remember, even as early as 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I was finally starting to confront depression. And of course, you couldn't
Yeah.
have depression in the church because it was
Yes. It
just the
was,
devil or
yes,
whatever.
you were
And
oppressed or
right,
possessed.
exactly. So I was finally starting to deal with it. And when doing inner work, everything, once you open yourself up, everything starts to come to the surface. And
Hmm.
I even got to be pretty suicidal with the thoughts and the feeling. I don't want, I can't take this
Yeah.
pain anymore. But I remember there were times, and I would say, the thought would hit me, you should pray.
Yeah.
Now, I
That's what I
knew
mean.
that it was not going to do anything.
Nothing.
So,
Yeah.
so my intellect had already kicked in on that part. Like,
Hmm.
it's not going to help, but I felt the urge to pray
Yes.
because that's what I knew, and I
Yeah.
knew everything inside me said, it's not going to help. It's not going to help. And I
Right.
didn't
Right.
pray. I didn't
Okay.
pray, but I do remember it still being there. And I was like, wow, after all this time, that urge is still there. And then that's when I realized how deep this stuff gets
Yes.
inside of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I
Yes,
think even for a
absolutely.
female, it sometimes run deeper because we were the water carriers, like Heather said.
Yeah.
We
Hmm.
carried the
Yeah.
responsibility of the church and of the men in that
Absolutely.
And
church.
every
Absolutely.
aspect, and as we talked early, every aspect of our lives was policed, our tone, our
Yeah.
actions, like
Hmm.
everything
Yes.
was micromanaged within these spaces. So,
I know.
reclaiming
True.
that
You want
is,
to hear a sad story? In my church, my sister and her first husband, they should have never been married. They got married out of fear and all that kind of thing. She got pregnant. And I still remember the meeting when the pastor came over to the house and it was horrible. But
Yes.
they were struggling financially. They already had two kids. She announced she was pregnant with her third child, their third child together. Do you know our church brought them in from a meeting and questioned them why they're having a baby? That's
wow,
how controlling that whole thing
that's
is.
so wild. That's so
Our
wild.
Yeah.
bedrooms were controlled.
But yeah,
Yeah.
The
um,
Yeah.
apostolic faith,
yeah,
how you approached your husband, what you
yeah,
did with your husband, those were detailed sermons.
yeah.
Yeah.
My dad, he found out that I was
Yeah,
having
so
sexual
disgusting.
relations with my boyfriend at 16, so he forced me to get married to this man. But I had been SA'd when I was 8. And I remember
Mm,
my brother approaching him and saying, "Hey, are you sure you want to marry my sister? Like, she's not a virgin anymore, you know?" And that was my reality though, because we were raised that if you were deflowered, you were devalued,
yeah,
so,
yeah.
and he
And look,
was
that's
he was
biblical.
a
You
prominent
deserve
Christian kid,
you
came
deserve
from
death
like,
if
yeah,
they found
another
out.
really highly ranking Christian family in the
At
church.
least
So,
50
yeah.
shekels.
And
Yeah,
but this is the way that these beliefs are played out. They're
Yeah.
played
yeah.
out in oppression and
And
harm and
oppression, right?
silencing people.
Control,
Hmm.
Yes, that's
manipulation. Yes.
exactly what it
Hmm.
is.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you so much for coming onto our show with us
Thank you for
today,
having me.
sharing your story with
Big
us,
love.
talking with us.
Yes.
We love these conversations because they are so healing and they
Yes.
shine a different light on this whole process. Like, I swear, every
Yes.
guest that we have talks about something a little bit different. And because
Hmm.
Hmm.
everybody's experience is different.
Yes.
So, to
Hmm.
all of our listeners that are here, if you enjoyed this show, please hit that like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you are ever interested in being a guest and sharing your story on our show, shoot us an email at theawakeningpod@gmail.com. We would love to have you here with us. And I'm definitely going to share Kyle's links. That way you can find him and watch his content because he puts out some really thought provoking stuff. So
And if
thank you
you
again.
forget
We love
about
you.
his links, you can definitely just reach out to us. We
Yes.
will give you his links.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
But
Thank
I
you
want
so
to
Thank you.
say,
much.
Kyle, thank you so much for what you do, for how you stand strong and true for other men in the community to understand what it means to be in a patriarchy system, misogyny, sexual harassment, all those
Yeah.
things that are really important for the men who are deconstructing to be able to have strong men in their lives that they can reach out to. And also, not only just the men. Thank you from the women of our
Yes.
community for holding our hands when we get weak and when we get tired, because there are days that we know we must go out tomorrow and continue our
Yeah,
Yes.
fight. But it's because we have men behind you that stand with us, not
Yes.
behind us, not in front of us. You
that's
stand
right.
side by side in this
Yes.
journey. And I just
Yes.
want to
Yes.
make sure that I take this time to say thank you for standing
Thank you.
side by side, Heather and I,
Yes.
and making sure and holding our hands up and knowing that we are supported by the men of our
Yeah.
community. There is so
Yes.
much love and respect. You have no
Yes.
idea.
We
So
love
thank
you.
you.
If I drown, would you pull me back to you?
Religion has many victims, and these are the stories of how they survived.
The preceding podcast is solely owned by the host or hosts and is distributed by Big Media LLC. Copyright 2026.